Hello, everybody. Welcome back down here at the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. And, damn, there have been several updates what we can expect from Fallout 76 now. And holy crap, you guys. Let's just go ahead and get the big one out of the way. We now get to have nukes. Not just Fat Man ammunition, but full on nuclear missiles that are still hanging out in their silos from before the Great War. I think this kind of goes a long way towards explaining why the East just kind of sucks and hasn't seen a lot of movement forwards on rebuilding and developing some kind of power structure or some sort of societal recreation. But anyways, now it seems like this would be the kind of thing that, in my mind, would be limited to more mid to late game sort of stuff. Uh, Looking at what they show in the trailer, you have to gather a fair number of key cards in order to be able to complete the launch command. These key cards you gather up from enemies. I'm assuming potentially you can trade for them or undertaking missions and the like. These may be rewards, but you have to get enough of them in order to get the launch sequence ready. And well, it sort of strikes me as this would be something that understandably they make challenging and make it difficult to earn these things, but the rewards look like they are really friggin' massive, man. But once you accomplish all of this, the might of the United States' remaining nuclear arsenal is at your command. And it looks like you can fire your nukes anywhere on the map. At least that's what's being indicated. And since we can destroy any part of the map now, the trailers are showing us that there's a pretty understandable change and visible difference in the terrain. I mean, this is probably one of the greenest and most um, living environments ever thrown into a Fallout game so far. What was once we see as a town turns into an irradiated ruin, just crawling with mutated creatures. Verdant landscapes are blasted out, the trees looking more like the familiar burned out husks that we're used to seeing from the previous games in the series. Given that 76 has more of a survival focus, I think that this would deplete a lot of the resources that are normally available from that area to you. But the announcement trailers at E3 also revealed to us that in place of what was there, the nuclear destruction of the targeted area will leave behind some fairly rare and incredibly valuable materials that you can make use of, some different resources. So at least that's going to be a trade-off, but at the same time, you're going to have some god-awful nightmares stalking those ruins. So, definitely load up for bear and proceed with caution after you do pull something like that off. Um, Now, for me though, although in Bethesda games, typically it's definitely a play to your own desired moral alignment kind of situation. This really indicates for me that the settlers coming out from Vault 76, these vault dwellers, they're not really intended as the good guys. At least that's what I have in my head. I mean, these people are focused on rebuilding. They're reclaiming America. They're the best and brightest, and the future of the nation starts with them in 76. This is reclamation and reconquest at any means necessary, it seems like. At least that's what I'm taking out of it. But maybe that's just me. That's just what I've got in my head. Definitely, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this. Is this kind of the direction they're taking the story, or is this just kind of something that's open for interpretation to all the players available? Certainly, it seems like in order to have that broad sort of appeal, Bethesda could potentially leave it so that it's open enough for that wide range of interpretation and many, many, many different play styles. But I don't know. I'd actually kind of like to see them take the story in a direction of, hey, these guys are not friendly. These guys are not good on any sort of a scale, whether it's however you want to try to measure it. These are some awful people, or these are people that are doing awful things in order to strive towards this, what is ostensibly a noble goal, rebuilding the United States. But along the way, they just commit ever increasingly horrible atrocities. But anyways, that brings us to something that Pete Hines has said, from Bethesda, has said in an interview with GameSpot. Um, Specifically, it was in regards to the online connectivity being implemented for 76. Specifically, he stated that the core things that you'd normally find in a Fallout game are still going to be there. The RPG aspect of developing your character and progressing through the story like you would in a single player game, but the connectivity is going to be an additional element, which, eh, I don't know. It just doesn't. I don't know. Something about all of that trying to come together there. It just doesn't jive well for me. I don't like the sounds of that. I don't see how the both things can be implemented without creating some amount of impact on one another. I mean, something's got to give somewhere if you're implementing an always online kind of focus, which is what's been indicated so far. Um, and also to go along with that, Mr. Hines has indicated that the bulk of the people you're going to meet in the world, and by people I mean humans, not ghouls, not super mutants or anything like that, but the people you meet are going to be other players. And he did state that there's going to be a system in place to prevent people from just absolutely griefing the crap out of you and players kicking the crap out of others and looting all the valuables off of them. Something like you'd see in Sea of Thieves. But he didn't really indicate a whole lot about how that's going to work. I mean, which is, it is interesting, and it makes me wonder, how is the story overall going to be moving forward here? And I would think that there's got to be some NPCs aside from the mobs that you're going to be encountering and fighting throughout the game. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, I do like the idea of being able to set up shop and conduct trade with other players. That seems kind of cool to me, even though the constant online connectivity just still sort of bothers me in spite of how cool that idea is. And I don't want every human enemy I run across to become or to be another player. I mean, I'm okay at playing shooters, but there's plenty of people that are better than me. And I'd rather not constantly be getting killed off, regardless of whether or not it affects my progress. I mean, I figure eventually I'd either get good or I'd get frustrated enough to quit, but I'd rather just play and enjoy the game rather than have to compete. But also on that note, he said that you can have one player or one character for when you go running around with your friends online, and then there's another that you can have for just going solo. And by going solo, I mean, I'm wondering, is he meaning that while there is online connectivity, there's a solo option where you are very limited in how many other players that you encounter and interact with, and most of what you find is going to be more along the lines of NPCs? And I'd hope so. I mean, for myself, I mean, I've got a newborn, and if I need to take a break from exploring the mess I'm making in West Virginia, it'd be handy to be able to pause and not have to worry about getting ganked just anytime I leave the screen for 10 minutes or more. Speaking of setting up shop that I mentioned a little bit back there, I love the new camp system so far. And being able to pick up, move, and build anywhere just sounds awesome. And it looks like it's going to overcome some of the build limitations that we found in Fallout 4. And hopefully, we can get some more aesthetic options on top of what we've seen so far and thrown into the mix there, along with a much more intuitive set of functions or ways of navigating through the build options, as well as a solid tutorial for making use of this new system. Fallout 4's system was pretty poorly implemented. I remember first playing through the game, and after having Sturgis tell me, oh, why don't you go ahead and go and build some of this stuff here for us? I was like, okay, great. How do I do that? I have no freaking clue, dude. And it took me a little bit to figure it out. And not terribly long, but it's one thing to drop people into the pool and go, here, swim, here's some tools for you, throw them on and get going. And then, swim, stop drowning. I don't know how to. You just stop drowning. It's just, it needs to be more intuitive and a little bit more helpful. And, oh, also, it's looking like we are going to be getting some new and interesting weapons thrown into the mix here. There's a part in the Bethesda announcement trailer where the player is getting attacked by another person. They take cover and then they return fire from their machine gun before sprinting across the way to dive behind another trailer where they switch to a flintlock pistol of all things. And I like it, but it just seems sort of odd. Although it does seem to be keeping in with that colonial Minuteman kind of aesthetic that they had with the laser muskets in 4. And the scene ends up ending with the attacker being shot from the player's flintlock and ends with a pretty damned killer scene where the player reloads as the attacker's sitting there on their knees, visibly struggling to stay conscious, and then the player just gives them that last execution shot. And the power armor still seems to have that diesel punk kind of look to it, and a similar HUD from the bits of gameplay that we do get to see. Um, and also, and I was definitely jazzed about this. One of the players, if you look close, uh, they seem to be carrying something like a 50 caliber machine gun. And hopefully they've redesigned the assault rifles from Fallout 4 to be something a little bit more, well, actually assault rifle sized. Overall, the graphics look like they've improved a little bit, but I don't know, graphical concerns have never really been that big of a concern of mine especially in comparison to graphical design, gameplay, and story. If something's already got a really unique look to it, a cohesive, thought out design, and a well meshed together look, and it looks good, that's good enough for me. I'm more concerned with. I'm really just more concerned with the enemy designs, the gameplay, the story content, especially in an RPG like the Fallout series that have traditionally just been so rich with these kind of things previously. Um, One thing I'm definitely excited to see from the trailers are those giant mutated bats that can screech apart your armor. I can't wait to start playing around and fighting some of these new mutated monstrosities that we're going to be able to find in West Virginia. Oh, and that leads me to another thing here. Uh, after there's a part in one of the trailers for setting where they're discussing rebuilding. There's one of these giant mutated bats that attacks a settlement, and the players all band together and work to bring it down. And afterwards, and the aftermath of all of this, and it looks like it was a hell of a battle with different pieces of the settlement being blown apart and players being staggered and just knocked around by the bat as it used this supersonic screech. The players all got to gather around and started striking poses and snapping photos with their Grizzly trophy. This just seems really cool to me, and it really adds a certain amount of character to this game for me. It seems like something you'd see in the animated Vault-Tec infomercials that we get to view at the start of each trailer, or so when Fallout 4 loads up. Uh, Overall, I've got to say I'm tentatively holding out hope that this ends up being a great game. And I love Fallout 4 despite its flaws, but I'm hoping that Bethesda has heard the feedback from the player base and their fans and have learned from those flaws, like that god awful dialogue system. I want to have more options with the dialogue, and I'd like the options to reflect how charismatic the character is, for good or for ill. I actually kind of hope that they step away from the perk system they had in Fallout 4, but what they do to replace all of that, given the online connectivity aspect, I'm not sure how they'd be able to, what they'd be able to step away to in order to balance everything out. as well, and maintain that RPG progression with player interactions and how they'd what kind of matchmaking system they'd have for players diving into the game. But I think we're just going to have to wait here and keep on speculating and discussing amongst ourselves what's coming up for us here. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are on Fallout 76. I'd love to hear them and take the time to discuss theories and ideas with you all. For now, though, I've been your host, Jordan, Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. If you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe, and make sure that you click the bell icon so that way you get notified the moment I publish more content for you folks. Thanks for your time. Have a good night.